At 3:12 inches the morning, I found my daughter standing barefoot on the roof, asking me if her death would bring her sister back. I don't even know what woke me up. There was no sound, no scream, nothing. Just this feeling deep in my gut, like something inside me already knew. I sat up in bed and looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. The house was dead silent, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. I got up and walked down the hall to Lily's room. Her door was open, her bed was empty. The sheets were cold. My heart started pounding. I called her name once, then twice. Nothing. Then I noticed the attic door at the end of the hallway was cracked open, and freezing air was pouring through. I climbed those stairs faster than I've ever moved in my life. When I pushed through the door to the balcony, I saw her. My 13-year-old daughter, standing at the edge of the roof in bare feet, wearing nothing but a thin pajama shirt. Her arms were hanging at her sides. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She just stood there, staring out into the dark like she was already somewhere else. Her eyes looked exactly like her little sister's eyes after the accident, hollow, empty, like someone had reached inside and turned off the light. When she heard me, she didn't even turn around. She just whispered, "Mom, if I die, will Emma come back?" Every cell in my body froze. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to her and grab her. But something in my training, something buried deep beneath the panic, told me to stay calm. So I took one step forward, then another, my bare feet burning against the frozen concrete, and I said the only thing I could think of. "Lily, look at me. Just look at me." 3 days earlier, at Christmas dinner, something happened that broke my daughter in a way I didn't understand, until it was almost too late. Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. I'm 41 years old, and what I'm about to tell you started 1 year after the day my youngest daughter stopped being who she used to be. I'm a family therapist. I've spent almost 15 years sitting across from broken families, helping them find their way back to each other. I've talked parents through divorces, helped kids process trauma, guided couples away from the edge. I thought I understood pain. I thought I knew what it looked like when a family was falling apart. But I had no idea what it felt like until it happened to mine. A little over a year before that Christmas, my youngest daughter, Emma, was 7 years old. She was the kind of kid who lit up every room she walked into, loud, silly, always laughing, always spinning in circles for no reason. One afternoon, she fell from the second-floor landing at my sister Vanessa's house during a family gathering. She hit the hardwood floor head first. By the time the ambulance arrived, she wasn't moving. Emma survived, but the girl who woke up in that hospital bed wasn't the same Emma. The brain injury changed everything. She couldn't walk the same. She couldn't talk the same. Some days, she didn't recognize me at all. And Lily, my oldest, she was standing right there when it happened. She was 12 at the time, supposed to be watching her little sister while the adults were downstairs. From that day on, Lily carried a guilt so heavy it bent her in half. She stopped sleeping. She stopped hanging out with friends. She started sitting next to Emma's bed every single night, whispering "I'm sorry" over and over like a prayer she couldn't stop repeating. And then there was Vanessa, my older sister, the one who hosted the party that day, the one whose house it happened in. Instead of grief, Vanessa chose blame. She never said it directly, not at first. But every phone call, every visit, every family dinner, she'd find a way to remind everyone that Lily was supposed to be watching Emma. A comment here, a look there, a sigh at just the right moment. And I let it happen. I told myself she was grieving. I told myself she'd come around. I chose silence because I thought it would keep the family together. When Vanessa invited us to Christmas dinner that year, I actually felt hopeful. I thought enough time had passed. I thought the wound had started to close. I thought that dinner would help us heal. I had no idea it would become the moment that nearly destroyed my child. The moment we walked into my sister's house, I knew something felt off. It was one of those feelings you can't explain, like walking into a room where people just stopped talking about you. Vanessa's house was decorated like a magazine cover. White lights wrapped around the staircase, a massive Christmas tree in the corner with perfectly matching ornaments, candles flickering on every surface. Everything looked beautiful, too beautiful. Like someone had spent hours making sure the outside looked perfect so no one would bother looking underneath. Vanessa greeted us at the door with a wide smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. She hugged me first, then looked down at Lily and said in this sweet voice, "Oh, Lily, you've gotten so tall. Come in, come in." But when her eyes moved to Emma sitting in her wheelchair, something shifted. It was fast, barely a second, but I caught it. Her smile tightened. She looked away. She didn't say a word to Emma. Not hello, not Merry Christmas, nothing. She just turned around and walked back toward the kitchen, like my youngest daughter wasn't even there. Lily noticed it too. I saw her jaw clench as she gripped the handles of Emma's wheelchair a little tighter. She leaned down and whispered something into Emma's ear, and Emma let out a small laugh, that uneven, breathy laugh that was all she could manage now. Lily forced a smile, but her eyes were already scanning the room like a soldier walking into enemy territory. The house was full of people. Vanessa's husband Greg was by the fireplace talking to some neighbors. Their kids were running around upstairs. A few cousins I hadn't seen in months were gathered around the dining table, picking at appetizers. Everyone was laughing, chatting, acting like this was just another normal holiday. And maybe for them, it was. But for us, every step into that house felt like walking on glass. I pushed Emma's wheelchair into the living room, and people smiled at us the way you smile at someone you feel sorry for. That polite, uncomfortable smile that says, "I don't know what to say to you, so I'll just pretend everything's fine." A few relatives came over to say hi. They asked me how work was going, if I was still at the same practice, surface-level questions that didn't mean anything. Nobody asked about Emma. Nobody asked how Lily was doing. It was like the accident existed in this invisible bubble that everyone agreed not to touch. Lily parked herself right next to Emma's wheelchair and didn't move. She sat on the arm of the couch, one hand resting on Emma's lap, like she was standing guard. Every few minutes, she'd lean over and fix Emma's blanket or brush the hair out of her face. She was 13 years old, but in that moment, she looked like a mother. Dinner was loud and crowded. Vanessa had set up a long table in the dining room with fancy plates and cloth napkins. There were place cards with everyone's name written in gold calligraphy. I noticed Lily's card was placed at the far end of the table, away from everyone else. Emma's wheelchair was positioned in the corner, almost like an afterthought. I moved Lily's card next to mine without saying anything. Vanessa saw me do it. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave me could have cut through steel. During dinner, the conversation floated around like smoke, light, harmless, meaningless. Greg talked about his new car. One of the cousins announced she was pregnant. Vanessa's oldest son bragged about getting into some elite prep school. Everyone clapped and congratulated each other like they were handing out awards. And through all of it, Lily sat in silence. She pushed her food around her plate, took small bites she barely chewed, and kept glancing over at Emma, who was being fed by me one slow spoonful at a time. At one point, Vanessa looked at Emma and then quickly looked away, her lips pressing together like she was holding something back. I felt the tension sitting right beneath the surface, like a crack in a frozen lake that everyone was pretending not to see. About an hour into dinner, after dessert plates were cleared and coffee was being poured, the room settled into that lazy, post-meal quiet. People leaned back in their chairs. Conversations got softer. And that's when Vanessa stood up. She reached under the table and pulled out an envelope. It was thick, cream-colored, sealed with a small red ribbon. She held it up and looked directly at Lily. The room went still, and then, right before dessert, Vanessa stood up with something in her hand, and everything changed. Vanessa cleared her throat and looked around the table with this expression I'd seen 100 times before, soft, controlled, the kind of face she put on when she wanted everyone to think she was being generous. She held the envelope against her chest and said in a trembling voice, "Before we end tonight, I want to share something really important. This past year has been the hardest year of my life. Watching what happened to our family, watching Emma suffer, it broke something inside me, so I wrote a letter. Not for me, for Lily. Every head at the table turned toward my daughter. Lily froze. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She slowly set it down and looked at Vanessa, then at me. Her eyes were wide, confused, already filling with something that looked like fear. I should have known. Every instinct I had as a therapist, every red flag I'd been trained to recognize, should have been screaming at me to stop this right there. But I didn't. Because part of me, the sister part, the part that still wanted to believe Vanessa had good intentions, that part told me to wait, to give her a chance. Vanessa walked around the table and stood next to Lily. She placed the envelope on the table in front of her and put a hand on her shoulder. Lily flinched at the touch but didn't move. She looked up at me again, her eyes asking a question she didn't know how to put into words. And I nodded. That small nod, that tiny movement of my head, is the single biggest regret of my entire life. Lily picked up the envelope with shaking hands. She pulled the ribbon loose and slid out 3 folded pages, handwritten in Vanessa's perfect cursive. The room was completely silent. Everyone was watching. Lily unfolded the first page and started reading. At first, her voice was barely a whisper. "Dear Lily, I've been thinking about you a lot this year." She paused, swallowed hard, and kept going. "I know this year has been difficult for all of us. I know you've been carrying a heavy weight on your young shoulders. And I think it's time someone told you the truth." My stomach dropped. I sat up straighter and looked at Vanessa. She was standing behind Lily with her hands clasped in front of her, eyes closed, like she was praying. But there was something else on her face, something I couldn't name yet. Lily continued reading, her voice getting smaller with every sentence. "The truth is, Emma's life changed forever because of what happened that day. She will never run again. She will never go to school like other kids. She will never have a normal life. And you were the one who was supposed to be watching her." The air in the room turned to ice. I felt my chest tighten so hard I couldn't breathe. Lily's hands started trembling, the paper shaking so badly that the words blurred in front of her. But she kept reading, because everyone was watching, because she didn't know she was allowed to stop. "I don't write this to hurt you. I write this because you need to understand the consequences of that day. Every time I look at Emma in that wheelchair, I think about the moment you looked away. Every time I hear her struggle to say a simple word, I think about the moment you chose not to pay attention. You were her big sister. You were supposed to protect her, and you failed." Lily's voice cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek and landed on the paper. She wiped it quickly, like she was ashamed of it, and kept going. "I hope one day you can find it in yourself to truly face what happened. Not hide from it, not pretend it didn't happen, but really, truly sit with the fact that your little sister's life was stolen because of a single moment of carelessness." I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor so hard it made everyone jump. But before I could say a word, Lily read the last line out loud. "I forgive you, Lily, but I hope you never forgive yourself, because Emma can't." The letter fell from Lily's hands. It floated down to the table like a dead leaf. The room was so quiet I could hear the Christmas tree lights buzzing. Lily sat perfectly still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, staring at the table, her hands flat on either side of the letter like she was trying to hold herself up. I looked at Vanessa, and that's when I finally recognized what was on her face. It wasn't grief. It wasn't pain. It was satisfaction. A quiet, hidden satisfaction, like she'd been waiting months to deliver this blow, and she'd finally landed it right where she wanted. My blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words tangled up in my throat. Around the table, nobody moved. A few relatives stared at their plates. Greg took a long sip of wine and looked away. One of the cousins quietly stood up and left the room. Nobody defended my daughter. Nobody said a word. And Lily, my sweet, broken Lily. She just sat there, absorbing every word like poison dripping into her veins. I should have stopped it right there. I should have grabbed that letter and torn it to pieces in front of everyone. I should have screamed at my sister until the walls shook. But by the time I realized what had just happened, by the time the therapist in me caught up to the mother in me, the damage was already done. I watched my daughter disappear right in front of me. Not physically. She was still sitting in that chair, still breathing, still blinking. But the Lily I knew, the girl who laughed too loud at her own jokes, who stayed up late drawing in her sketchbook, who sang off-key in the shower every morning, that girl was gone. Something behind her eyes just switched off, like someone had pulled a plug. I moved fast. I grabbed the letter off the table, crumpled it in my fist, and shoved it into my pocket. Then I knelt down in front of Lily and took her face in my hands. Her skin was ice cold. "Lily, look at me. Baby, look at me." She didn't respond. Her eyes were open, but they weren't seeing me. They were locked on something far away, somewhere I couldn't reach. Her breathing was shallow, quick little breaths that barely moved her chest. I'd seen this before in my office, in patients who had just experienced acute psychological trauma. The body shuts down to protect itself. The mind goes somewhere safe. But this wasn't a patient. This was my child. Behind me, I heard Vanessa's voice, calm and measured, like she was explaining something obvious to a room full of slow learners. She crossed her arms and said to the table, "I know it's hard to hear, but she needed to face the truth. She's been walking around this whole year pretending nothing happened, and someone had to say it." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because if I looked at my sister in that moment, I would have done something I could never take back. Instead, I kept my eyes on Lily. I stroked her hair. I whispered her name over and over. And then, slowly, like a dam cracking from the inside, Lily started to come apart. It started with her hands. They curled into tight fists on the table, her knuckles turning white. Then her shoulders began to shake. Not crying, not yet. Just this deep, involuntary trembling that moved through her whole body like an earthquake rolling through the ground. And then she spoke. Her voice came out flat, robotic, like someone reading lines from a script they didn't understand. "She's right. It's my fault. I was supposed to watch her. I looked away. I looked away, and Emma fell. It's my fault. It's all my fault." She said it over and over, each time a little faster, a little more desperate, like she was trying to convince herself of something she'd been fighting against for an entire year. And then she did something that shattered me. She raised her right hand and slapped herself across the face. Hard. The sound cracked through the silent room like a gunshot. Before I could react, she did it again, and again. Each hit harder than the last, her palm leaving red marks across her own cheek. I grabbed her wrists and held them tight. "Stop, Lily, stop." She fought against me, twisting and pulling, trying to free her hands so she could keep hurting herself. Tears finally came. Not gentle tears, but ugly, choking sobs that ripped out of her chest like something being torn apart. "I killed her. I killed Emma. She's gone because of me. Emma's alive, baby. She's right here. She's alive. No, she's not. The real Emma is gone. And it's because I didn't watch her. Aunt Vanessa is right. Everyone knows it. Everyone." That's when Vanessa decided to speak again. She took a step closer and said in that same controlled voice, "See, she knows. Deep down she knows she's guilty. I didn't put that guilt there, Rachel. It was already there. I just gave her permission to stop pretending." Something inside me snapped. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I mean, I physically felt something break loose in my chest, like a cable pulled too tight for too long finally giving way. I stood up, still holding Lily against me, and I turned to face my sister. My voice came out low, steady, and more dangerous than I've ever heard it. "If you say one more word to my daughter, I swear to God, Vanessa, it will be the last thing you ever say to anyone in this family." The room went dead silent. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time that night, she had nothing to say. I didn't wait for a response. I scooped Lily up with one arm, grabbed Emma's wheelchair with the other, and I walked out of that house without looking back. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't grab our coats. I didn't care that it was below freezing outside and my kids had no jackets. I just needed to get them out of there. I loaded Emma into the car first, then guided Lily into the back seat. She was still shaking, still whispering it's my fault on a loop, her eyes red and swollen, her cheek still burning from her own hand. I buckled her in, kissed her forehead, and closed the door. Then I stood in my sister's driveway, in the freezing Colorado night, and I pressed both hands against the roof of my car and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for an entire year. That night, I thought leaving was enough. I thought getting my girls out of that house, away from Vanessa, away from all of it, would be enough to fix things. I was wrong. The house became quieter than I had ever heard it before, and I don't mean peaceful quiet. I mean the kind of quiet that crawls under your skin and sits there, pressing down on your chest until you can barely breathe. The kind of quiet that tells you something is very, very wrong. The first morning after Christmas, I woke up early and walked to Lily's room. Her door was open. She was sitting on the floor next to Emma's bed, her back against the wall, her knees pulled up to her chest. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't reading. She was just sitting there, staring at Emma's face, like she was memorizing it, like she was afraid her little sister might vanish if she looked away for even a second. I knelt down beside her and touched her arm. Her skin was freezing. "Lily, honey, how long have you been here?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look at me. She just whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. "I'm watching her. Mom. I won't look away this time." My throat closed up. I sat down next to her, put my arm around her shoulders, and pulled her close. She didn't lean into me. She didn't pull away. She just stayed perfectly still, like a statue made of glass that would shatter at the slightest touch. That whole day, Lily didn't eat. I made her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with extra syrup, the way she always liked them. She sat at the table and stared at the plate for 20 minutes without picking up her fork. When I asked her to take just one bite, she looked at me with those hollow eyes and said, "Emma can't eat pancakes anymore." Why should I? I didn't have an answer for that. By the second day, the silence had become something physical, something that filled every corner of the house like smoke. Lily stopped talking almost entirely. When I asked her a question, she'd either nod or shake her head. When I told her I loved her, she'd close her eyes like the words caused her pain. She moved through the house like a ghost, always ending up in the same place, next to Emma. She'd sit beside her sister's bed and whisper the same thing over and over. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. It should have been me. It should have been me. I'm a therapist. I've been trained to recognize the signs of acute trauma response, dissociation, withdrawal, self-punishment, survivor's guilt spiraling into something darker. I knew what I was seeing. I knew the textbook terms for every single thing my daughter was doing, but knowing the words for something and watching it happen to your own child are two completely different things. On the second night, I called my colleague, Dr. Sarah Chen, and described what was happening. I tried to keep my voice clinical, professional, detached, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. After listening carefully, Sarah paused for a long moment, then said in a serious tone, "Rachel, what you're describing sounds like the beginning stages of a severe dissociative episode combined with acute self-blame disorder. This isn't normal grief. She's retreating inward, and if she goes too far, you might not be able to pull her back. You need to get her into my office first thing tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator and pressed my hands over my mouth so my girls wouldn't hear me cry. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you about being a therapist and a mother at the same time. You can see exactly what's happening. You can name it, label it, understand every single mechanism at work inside your child's mind. But you can't fix it. Not when you're this close. Not when the patient is the person you love more than anything in this world. That night, I checked on Lily 3 times before going to bed. Each time, she was in the same spot, sitting on the floor next to Emma's bed, whispering apologies to a little girl who couldn't understand what she was saying. The third time, around midnight, I gently told her to please go to her own bed, get some rest. She looked up at me, and for just a second, something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like a decision being made. She nodded slowly and walked to her room. I watched her close the door. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Then I went to bed, telling myself that tomorrow we'd see Sarah, tomorrow we'd start fixing this, tomorrow would be better. At 3:07 a.m., I woke up. The house was silent. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, and then a feeling hit me, sudden and sharp, like a hand grabbing my heart and squeezing. I threw off the covers and ran to Lily's room. Her door was open, her bed was empty, the sheets were cold, and the attic door at the end of the hallway was wide open, letting in a river of frozen air. On the third night, I woke up, and she was gone. She looked at me and asked if dying would fix everything. Those words came out of my 13-year-old daughter's mouth, like she was asking about the weather, calm, flat, completely detached from the horror of what she was saying. I stood in the attic doorway, the wind cutting through my pajamas like razor blades, and I looked at my little girl standing on the edge of that roof. Her bare feet were turning blue against the frozen concrete. Her thin pajama shirt was flapping in the wind. She wasn't shivering anymore, and that scared me more than anything, because when the body stops shivering, it means it's already starting to give up. She didn't turn around when she heard me. She just kept staring out into the darkness, her arms hanging limp at her sides, and she spoke in that same hollow voice. If I'm gone, maybe God will give Emma back. The real Emma. Like a trade. That's how it works, right? You give something back, and you get something in return. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack through. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to run to her, to grab her, to pull her away from that edge. But I knew, from years of training, and from everything I'd ever learned about crisis intervention, that sudden movement could startle her. One flinch, one wrong step, and she could go over. So I forced myself to be still. I took a slow breath, and I made my voice as calm and steady as I could manage. Lily, that's not how it works, sweetheart. Emma is still here. She's downstairs, sleeping in her bed right now. She needs her big sister. Lily shook her head slowly. She doesn't need me. I'm the reason she's like that. Aunt Vanessa said it. Everyone at that table heard it, and nobody said she was wrong. Because she wasn't wrong, Mom. A gust of wind hit us both. Lily swayed slightly, and my stomach dropped so fast I nearly collapsed. I took one step forward, then another, keeping my hands open and visible, the way you approach someone who's about to shatter. Lily, please look at me. Just turn around and look at me. For a long moment, nothing happened. The wind howled. The cold burned. And then, slowly, she turned her head. When I saw her face, something inside me broke in a way that will never fully heal. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there were no tears left. Her lips were cracked and blue. And there was this expression on her face. Not fear, not sadness, but exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying a weight too heavy for too long. She looked at me and said, barely above a whisper, I don't know how to live anymore, Mom. Every day I wake up and I see Emma, and I remember it's my fault. I hear Aunt Vanessa's voice in my head. All day, every day. She's right. I was supposed to watch her. I looked away. I looked away for 1 second, and now Emma will never be normal again. How am I supposed to live with that? I was close enough now. Close enough to reach her. I stretched out my hand, slow, gentle, like I was reaching for something made of smoke. You take my hand, that's how. You take my hand, and we walk back inside together, and we figure it out. Not alone, together. She stared at my hand. Her chin started to tremble. And then her whole body began to shake. Not from the cold, but from everything she'd been holding inside since that letter, since Christmas, since the day Emma fell. She crumbled. Her knees buckled and she dropped to the concrete, and I caught her before she hit the ground. I wrapped my arms around her so tight I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, fast, wild, like a trapped bird trying to break free. She buried her face in my neck, and the sobs came, raw and ugly and desperate, the kind of crying that empties you out completely. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I don't want to die. I just don't know how to make it stop hurting." I held her and rocked her and cried with her, sitting on that frozen rooftop in the middle of a Colorado winter, two people breaking apart and holding each other together at the same time. I don't know how long we stayed up there. It could have been 5 minutes or an hour. When Lily finally went quiet, I picked her up and carried her back inside. She was too weak to walk. Her feet were so cold they'd gone numb. I carried her down the attic stairs, wrapped her in every blanket I could find, and held her on the couch until the sun came up. She fell asleep in my arms around 5 a.m., her fingers still gripping my shirt like she was afraid I'd disappear. And as I sat there in the gray morning light, listening to my daughter breathe, one thought burned through every other thought in my mind. That was the moment I knew. Silence had almost killed my child, and I was done being silent. There was something I had kept hidden for a year. Something that changed everything about the accident, about who was really responsible, about why Emma fell that day. 3 weeks after Emma's accident, a detective named Garcia had called me. He said the investigation had turned up something unusual. The second-floor railing where Emma fell had a child safety lock installed on it, the kind that's supposed to prevent kids from opening the gate on their own. But when they examined it after the accident, the lock had been switched off. Not broken, not damaged, deliberately turned off. When Garcia told me that, I felt a chill run down my spine. He asked me if I knew who might have disabled it. I said I didn't, but that wasn't true. The week before the accident, Vanessa had thrown a big cocktail party at her house. She'd complained to me on the phone about how the safety locks on the upstairs railings were ugly and ruining the aesthetic for her guests. I remember her exact words. She said, "Nobody wants to see baby gates at a grown-up party." I didn't think much of it at the time, but after Garcia's call, the pieces started clicking together in a way that made me sick. Vanessa had turned off the safety locks for her party and never turned them back on. Emma didn't fall because Lily looked away. Emma fell because the one thing designed to keep her safe had been deliberately removed by the same woman who spent an entire year telling my daughter it was her fault. I knew this for 12 months. 12 months of watching Lily drown in guilt. 12 months of listening to Vanessa drop her poisoned comments at every family gathering. 12 months of silence, because I was terrified of what the truth would do to our family. But after that rooftop, after holding my daughter on the edge of death, I was done protecting anyone but my children. At 4 a.m., I got in my car and drove straight to my sister's house. I didn't knock. I pounded on the door. It was barely 5 a.m., still dark outside, the cold biting through my jacket. I didn't care. I hit that door with my fist over and over until the porch light flicked on and I heard footsteps. Vanessa opened the door in her bathrobe, her face twisted in confusion. Before she could say a single word, I pushed past her and walked straight into her living room. She followed me, already starting with that voice, that controlled, measured voice she used whenever she wanted to make someone feel small. "Rachel, what on earth are you doing? It's 5 in the morning. Have you lost your mind?" I turned around and looked her dead in the eyes. "My daughter almost jumped off the roof tonight." Vanessa blinked. For a split second, something crossed her face, maybe shock, maybe fear. But it vanished fast, replaced by that same cold composure. She crossed her arms and said, "That's not my fault. She's clearly unstable. Maybe you should focus on being a better mother instead of showing up at my door in the middle of the night." Every ounce of restraint I had left evaporated. I pulled out my phone, opened the file I'd saved from Detective Garcia, and held it up in front of her face. "You turned off the safety locks. You disabled them for your party and never put them back on. Emma didn't fall because Lily wasn't watching. Emma fell because you removed the only thing keeping her safe. And you knew it. You knew it this whole time, and instead of owning it, you spent a year destroying my daughter so nobody would ever look at you. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her hands dropped to her sides. I stepped closer. You wrote that letter to bury your own guilt. You made a 13-year-old girl believe she destroyed her sister's life so you could sleep at night, and tonight, she almost died because of it. Vanessa's composure finally cracked. Her lips started trembling. She backed up until she hit the wall and slowly slid down to the floor. She pressed her hands over her face and whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stood over her, my whole body shaking with a rage I didn't even know I was capable of. But it did, and I'm done protecting you. I walked out knowing I had just ended my relationship with my own sister. 2 months later, the police called me. Detective Garcia said Vanessa had come into the station on her own and given a full confession. She admitted she had disabled the safety locks before her party and never reinstalled them. She admitted she knew about it the entire time. And she admitted that she had deliberately shifted blame onto Lily to protect herself from legal consequences. Hearing those words should have felt like relief. It didn't. It felt like swallowing broken glass. The district attorney's office reviewed the case and charged Vanessa with criminal negligence, resulting in serious bodily harm to a minor. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, arguing that it was an accident, that she never intended for anyone to get hurt. But the prosecutor pushed back hard, pointing out that Vanessa had not only caused the accident through negligence, but had spent an entire year psychologically tormenting a child to cover it up. The judge agreed. In the end, Vanessa was sentenced to 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory psychological counseling, and a restraining order preventing any contact with Lily or Emma. She also lost her nursing license. Greg filed for divorce 3 weeks after the sentencing. The family split apart like a tree hit by lightning. Cousins picked sides. Aunts and uncles stopped calling. My parents, who had watched everything unfold from the sidelines without ever stepping in, called me once to say they thought I had gone too far by involving the police. I hung up on them and haven't spoken to them since. Some nights I'd sit in the kitchen after the girls were asleep, staring at the wall, wondering if I did the right thing. My sister was facing criminal charges because of me. My family was torn apart because of me. But then I'd walk to Lily's room and watch her sleep, and I'd remember the look on her face on that rooftop, and every doubt would disappear. Justice was served. But it didn't feel like victory. A year has passed since that Christmas, and my life no longer looks anything like it used to. The family I grew up in, the one I spent my whole life trying to hold together, doesn't exist anymore. Vanessa and I haven't spoken since the sentencing. My parents chose her side, which I expected but still felt like a knife between the ribs. Most of my cousins disappeared. The holidays are quiet now. Just me, Lily, and Emma, sitting around a small table with no fancy decorations and no place cards written in gold calligraphy. And honestly, it's the most peace I've felt in years. Lily is getting better, slowly. She sees Dr. Chen twice a week. Some days are good. She laughs, she draws in her sketchbook, she sings off-key in the shower again. Other days, the darkness comes back. She'll go quiet, sit next to Emma's bed, and stare at the wall for hours. On those days, I sit with her. I don't try to fix it. I don't use my therapist voice. I just sit there and hold her hand and let her know she's not alone. She told me last month, during one of her better days, that she doesn't hear Aunt Vanessa's voice in her head anymore. She said it got quieter after the trial, and now most days it's gone completely. When she told me that, I went to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes straight. Emma is still Emma. She still can't walk on her own. She still struggles with words. But last week, she grabbed Lily's hand and said, "Clear as day, sissy." Lily burst into tears and held her little sister so tight, I thought she'd never let go. I used to believe that keeping the peace was the same as keeping people safe. I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect anyone. It just gives the people causing harm more room to operate. I lost my sister. I lost my parents. I lost the family I thought I needed. But I kept my daughters. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing. Well, that's not entirely true. I would have spoken up sooner. So if you're listening to this and you're staying quiet to keep the peace, if you're swallowing the truth because you're afraid of what it'll do to your family, let me tell you something from the other side. The truth might burn everything down, but silence will burn your children from the inside out, and no family is worth that. If you were in my place, would you have stayed silent to protect your family? Or spoken up to protect your child? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the ones who need saving the most are the ones who never ask for help.